The psychology of making people obsessed, why they can't stop thinking about you. What if attraction wasn't luck, but strategy? Beneath every obsession lies a subtle game of emotional control, scarcity, and psychological tension. People don't chase what is easily available. They crave what feels just out of reach. By mastering mystery, unpredictability, and the art of selective attention, you become unforgettable. Obsession is not created through constant presence, but through calculated absence. When you learn to stimulate curiosity, trigger desire, and leave questions unanswered, you embed yourself in their mind. This is not manipulation. It is influence at its most refined, where desire grows strongest in the spaces you deliberately leave empty. Let me begin with something that may feel counterintuitive. We've been taught that to matter, we must be constantly present, always available, always responding, always proving our worth. But that instinct, as natural as it feels, works against you. What people can easily access, they slowly stop valuing. Familiarity, when overexposed, does not deepen attraction. It erodes it. The mind is wired differently. It is drawn not to what is fully known, but to what remains just out of reach. Think about the moments when someone lingered in your thoughts far longer than they should have. It was rarely because they were always there. It was because they weren't. They appeared, made an impression, and then withdrew, leaving behind questions, fragments, a sense of something unfinished. That absence created space, and in that space your imagination went to work. You filled in the gaps. You replayed interactions. You assigned meaning. Without realizing it, you became emotionally invested. This is the subtle power of absence. It is not about disappearing entirely or playing crude games. It is about understanding rhythm, knowing when to step forward and when to step back. Presence sparks interest, but absence magnifies it. When you are not constantly available, every interaction gains weight. Your words are considered more carefully. Your presence feels intentional, not routine. You become something people anticipate rather than something they take for granted. There is also a deeper psychological mechanism at play. The human mind seeks resolution. When something feels incomplete, it creates a kind of tension, an itch that demands to be scratched. If you are always there, always explaining, always giving more, you remove that tension. But when you leave a conversation slightly unfinished, when you exit at the moment of peak engagement, when you resist the urge to overdeliver, you create a lingering effect. You stay with them not physically, but mentally, and here is where most people make their mistake. They believe effort is measured by how much they give, so they flood the other person with attention, with messages, with explanations, thinking it will secure their place. But excess does not create attachment, it creates saturation. The more you give without pause, the less impact each piece has. What you want instead is contrast. You want moments of connection followed by moments of distance. That contrast is what gives your presence its value. You are not trying to be distant or cold, you are cultivating significance. When you understand that your absence can speak as loudly as your presence, you begin to move differently. You become deliberate. You choose your moments instead of reacting to every impulse. And in doing so, you shift the dynamic. People begin to lean toward you, to seek you out, to wonder about you. Because in the end, what lingers in the mind is not what is constantly seen. It is what is briefly felt and then taken away. Now, once you understand the power of absence, something else becomes equally important, what you reveal when you are present. Because presence alone is not enough. If in those moments you give everything away, your thoughts, your history, your intentions, you undo the very tension you've created. The instinct to fully explain yourself, to be completely transparent, feels honest, but psychologically it drains intrigue. People are not captivated by perfection. Perfection is static, predictable, finished. There's nothing to explore. What draws them in is mystery, the sense that there is more beneath the surface, something they have not yet uncovered. When a person cannot fully define you, their mind keeps returning, trying to complete the picture. Think about how quickly we lose interest in something once we feel we understand it completely. There is no more pursuit, no more discovery. But when something remains partially hidden, it holds our attention. It invites curiosity. And curiosity is a powerful emotional hook. It pulls people in without force. This does not mean you become distant or silent. It means you become selective. You reveal pieces of yourself, but never all at once. You allow your personality to unfold over time, like a story with chapters, not a summary given in a single moment. Each interaction adds a layer, but also leaves something unresolved. And here is where subtlety becomes your greatest asset. Mystery is not created by acting strange or withholding everything. It is created by contrast. You might share something personal, but not explain it fully. You might express a strong opinion, but leave room for interpretation. You give just enough clarity to engage, but enough ambiguity to provoke thought. When you do this, something interesting happens. People begin to project onto you. In the absence of complete information, they fill in the gaps with their own desires, their own expectations. They start to see what they want to see. And because this image is partly their creation, it becomes more powerful to them than anything you could have explicitly stated. Most people, without realizing it, eliminate this effect. They overcommunicate. They clarify every detail, answer every question, remove every doubt. They believe this builds connection, but it actually limits imagination. When nothing is left unsaid, nothing is left to explore. There is also confidence embedded in mystery. When you are comfortable not explaining everything, it signals that you do not need constant validation. You are not trying to convince. You are allowing others to come to you. That quiet confidence is compelling. It suggests depth. And depth is what people become obsessed with, not surface-level perfection, but the feeling that there is always more to uncover. So when you speak, when you share, resist the urge to complete every thought. Leave space. Let your words echo slightly beyond their meaning. Give people something to return to, something to question, something to imagine. Because what you leave unsaid often speaks louder than what you reveal. And it is in that silence that fascination begins to grow. Once you've created absence and layered it with mystery. Something deeper begins to take shape. The emotional experience people have when they interact with you. And this is where most people unknowingly flatten their impact. They aim for consistency at all costs. They want to be steady, predictable, easy to understand. It feels safe. But psychologically, safety rarely creates obsession. Intensity does. Human beings are not wired to remember the ordinary. We remember what moves us, what surprises us, what disrupts our expectations, what makes us feel something sharply. When every interaction with you feels the same, it blends together. There's no edge, no contrast, no reason for the mind to hold on to it. But when emotions fluctuate, when there are subtle highs and lows, you create an experience that stands out. Think about the nature of anticipation. If someone knows exactly what they will get from you every time, there is no anticipation. But when there is a hint of unpredictability, not chaos but variation, their attention sharpens. They begin to wonder, what will this interaction be like? That question alone creates engagement before you even arrive. This doesn't mean becoming erratic or emotionally unstable. That's a crude misunderstanding. What you are shaping is rhythm. At times you are warm, present, engaging fully there. And then, without warning but without explanation, you pull back slightly. You become more reserved, more focused, less immediately accessible. That contrast creates a shift in emotional tone. And that shift is powerful, because people begin to associate you with emotional movement. One moment, they feel seen, energized, connected. Another moment, they feel a subtle distance, a slight uncertainty. That uncertainty is not discomfort, it's tension. And tension, when controlled, is what keeps the mind engaged. There is a principle at work here. The brain becomes more attached to experiences that are inconsistent in reward. When something is given every time, it loses its effect. But when it is given unpredictably, it becomes more valuable. The person starts to chase not just you, but the feeling they had with you. Most people do the opposite. They believe that to build connection, they must be constantly reassuring, constantly available, constantly consistent in their emotional output. But what they actually create is emotional monotony. There's no peak, no valley, just a flat line. And a flat line does not hold attention. When you introduce variation, you create moments that stand out. A conversation that feels unusually deep. A moment of attention that feels more intense than expected. A pause that feels slightly longer than usual. These are small shifts, but they accumulate. They make the experience of you feel dynamic, alive. And over time, something subtle happens. The person begins to anticipate those emotional highs. They replay them, they look forward to them, they wonder when they will happen again. And because they cannot predict it exactly, the experience becomes more compelling. You are no longer just a person in their life. You are an emotional experience they cannot quite control. And that is the key. Obsession is not built on logic. It is built on feeling, on the rise and fall, the tension and release, the sense that something meaningful is happening just beneath the surface. When you learn to shape that rhythm, to move between presence and restraint, warmth and distance, you create something far more powerful than consistency. You create emotional gravity, something they feel but cannot fully explain. By now, you can begin to see the pattern. Absence creates space. Mystery fills it. Emotional rhythm gives it life. But there's another layer, and this one is often overlooked because it feels less visible, less immediate. It is the question of who is doing the work in the interaction, you or them. Most people believe their role is to impress, to perform, to give more and more so the other person stays engaged. They think attraction is something they must carry on their shoulders, but that dynamic is fundamentally flawed. When one person does all the work, the other becomes passive. And passivity does not lead to obsession, it leads to indifference. What you want instead is participation. You want the other person to lean in, to think, to invest energy into understanding you, reaching you, maintaining the connection. Because the more effort someone puts into something, the more value they assign to it. This is a quiet psychological truth. We cherish what we build, what we pursue, what we work for. Think about it in simple terms. If something is handed to you with no effort, you may enjoy it briefly, but you won't form a deep attachment. But if you have to work for it, if you have to figure it out, wait for it, earn moments of it, it becomes meaningful. It becomes personal. So instead of overwhelming someone with attention or explanation, you create openings. You allow them to ask questions rather than answering everything up front. You leave room for them to initiate, to reach out, to wonder. When they speak, you don't rush to fill every silence. You let them carry part of the interaction. And this requires restraint. Because the instinct is to help, to clarify, to make things easy. But ease removes investment. When everything flows effortlessly from your side, the other person never has to engage deeply. They simply receive. Now imagine the opposite dynamic. They find themselves thinking about what to say to you. They replay your words, trying to understand them more deeply. They anticipate your response. They make small efforts, sending a message, starting a conversation, trying to hold your attention. These may seem like minor actions, but psychologically they are significant. Each effort is a thread, and over time those threads form attachment. You are not forcing this. You are allowing space for it. You are stepping back just enough so they can step forward. There is also a sense of ownership that begins to develop. When someone invests in you time, thought, emotional energy, they begin to feel connected to you in a deeper way, not because of what you gave them, but because of what they gave to you. That distinction is crucial. Most people try to increase their value by giving more, but real value is often created by what you draw out of others. When you become someone they think about, someone they try to understand, someone they make an effort toward, you are no longer just present in their life. You are embedded in their mental and emotional world. And once that happens, the dynamic shifts completely. They are no longer observing you from a distance. They are participating in something that feels personal, something they have contributed to shaping. That is where attachment deepens, not in what you give, but in what they invest. Because in the end, people don't become obsessed with what they receive, they become obsessed with what they cannot stop putting effort into. As this dynamic deepens, absence, mystery, emotional rhythm, and their growing investment, something else begins to emerge, something more precise, more strategic. You start to notice patterns in what they respond to. Their words reveal it, their energy reveals it, even their silences reveal it. Every person carries within them a set of quiet desires, sometimes unspoken, sometimes even unrecognized by themselves. The need to feel important, the desire to be understood, the craving for excitement, validation, or escape. Most people overlook this entirely. They stay focused on expressing themselves, proving their own value, pushing their own narrative forward. But the real shift happens when you turn your attention outward, when you begin to observe, to listen, to decode what truly moves the other person. And once you see it, you don't overwhelm them with it. You reflect it back, carefully, selectively. If they crave attention, you give it in moments that feel genuine and focused. If they seek understanding, you show glimpses of insight into who they are. If they long for excitement, you bring an energy that breaks their routine. You become in subtle ways aligned with what they desire. This creates a powerful sense of connection. They begin to feel seen, almost as if you understand them in a way others do not. And that feeling is rare. It draws them closer, lowers their guard, deepens their emotional engagement. But here's where restraint becomes critical again. If you fully satisfy those desires, if you give them constant validation, constant attention, constant fulfillment, you close the loop. The tension disappears. The experience becomes complete. And with completion comes a kind of quiet decline in intensity. Instead, you give just enough to awaken the feeling, but not enough to settle it. You offer moments of recognition, then you pull back. You create sparks, not a steady flame. This keeps the emotional current alive. They feel something meaningful, but they don't feel finished. There is always a sense that there is more to experience, more to understand, more to gain. And so their mind stays engaged. They think about you not just because of who you are, but because of how you make them feel, and how that feeling is never entirely resolved. It becomes a kind of loop. They return again and again, seeking that same sense of connection, that same spark. This is not about deception. It is about timing and control. You are not pretending to be something you are not. You are choosing when and how to reveal what you are. You are shaping the emotional experience rather than leaving it to chance. Most people give everything at once, thinking it will secure interest. But what they actually do is remove the reason to stay engaged. When every need is met immediately, there is nothing left to pursue. You, on the other hand, allow desire to breathe. You let it build, expand, linger. You understand that what keeps someone emotionally tied is not satisfaction. It is anticipation. So you become a source of something they value deeply, but can never fully hold on to. And in that space between fulfillment and longing, obsession quietly takes root. And now, at the final layer, everything converges into something far more subtle, far more powerful, the story that forms around you. Because in the end, people are not obsessed with a person as much as they are obsessed with the idea of that person, the version that exists in their mind, the meaning they attach to your presence. Every interaction you've had up to this point, your absence, your mystery, the emotional rhythm, the investment you've drawn from them, the desires you've carefully touched, all of it feeds into a narrative, and that narrative is what ultimately takes hold. The human mind is constantly trying to make sense of things. It wants coherence, it wants to define, it wants to label. But when something resists easy definition, when it feels layered, slightly elusive, emotionally charged, it becomes more compelling. The mind keeps returning to it, trying to complete the picture. And here is where your awareness becomes crucial. Whether you intend to or not, people are already forming a story about you. The question is, are you shaping that story, or are you leaving it to chance? Most people leave it to chance. They act without intention, reveal themselves inconsistently, and allow others to piece together whatever interpretation happens to form. Sometimes it works in their favor, often it does not, because once a narrative settles, it becomes difficult to change. But when you begin to move with awareness, you guide that perception. Not through force, not through obvious self-promotion, but through subtle signals. You become consistent in your essence, even if your behavior has variation. There is a tone, a presence, a feeling that surrounds you. Perhaps you come across as someone who is difficult to fully understand, but intriguing because of it. Someone who is selective, not distant, but intentional. Someone who carries depth, but does not display it all at once. These impressions are not stated, they are inferred. And what people infer, they believe more strongly than what they are told. There is also power in contrast here. At times, you may reveal something unexpectedly genuine, something that breaks the pattern just enough to deepen the story. It adds dimension, it makes the narrative feel real, not constructed, and that balance between consistency and surprise is what keeps the story alive. Over time, they begin to attach meaning to even your smallest actions. A message from you feels significant, a pause feels intentional, a moment of attention feels rare and valuable. Everything becomes part of the narrative they are building. And once that narrative takes hold, something shifts. They are no longer reacting only to what you do. They are reacting to what they believe you are. Their thoughts about you become layered, emotional, and deeply personal. You occupy space not just in their life, but in their pseudo, their inner world. At that point, your presence is no longer required to maintain the connection. The idea of you does the work. The story continues, even in your absence. And that is the ultimate position, to be felt without effort, to be remembered without reminder, to be thought about without prompting. Because when you control the story, you no longer chase attention. You become the thought they cannot escape, the psychology of making people obsessed. Master the art of desire and control. What if you could enter someone's mind and stay there without trying? Obsession isn't created by chasing attention, but by mastering absence, mystery, and emotional tension. People don't crave what is obvious. They become consumed by what they cannot fully understand or possess. When you learn to control perception, trigger curiosity, and leave desires slightly unfulfilled, you create a powerful psychological pull. This is not about force. It's about influence.